Hey there, everybody. How's it going? Welcome back to another episode of Kickback Comics. My name is Antonio.
My name is Ben, and y'all are listening to a comic book podcast
By two guys who have not read a lot of comics, but are looking to get involved, read some cool stories, rise from hell, beat up the KKK, like that one scene in Red Dead Redemption 2 where it doesn't matter what you do and they die anyway. So that's what we're doing.
Yep, that's what we're doing. We're doing a book club. We're reading comics. Thank you guys so much for joining us.
Yeah.
This is a cool episode because not only do we have a guest,
Yes.
Isaiah, but also it's our first ever Zoom recording.
Yeah, indeed.
So we got through troubleshooting, figuring out how to get all that.
And there was a lot of trouble to be shot.
Yeah, but we
But we
got
made
there.
it happen.
We got there, and so exciting new developments, continuing to expand our horizons here as a podcast.
Yeah.
We had a really great conversation.
Indeed.
I am getting over a cold, so apologies for me coughing and whatever in the background, but hopefully I'll take most of that out.
Sounds good.
And thank you guys for joining us. Check us out on Instagram, Kickback Comics Pod. Rate and review us on all your platforms.
All that good stuff.
And at this point, I think we'll throw it over to that Zoom conversation.
Yep, sounds good. See you there.
Here we are. Guest
We are here.
episode.
Yeah, guest episode is crazy. We got the boy Isaiah. Isaiah, thank you for joining us, my boy.
Hello, thank you for having me. Really excited to be on the podcast. When Antonio had told me about it, I was like, fuck yeah, I love comics. I mean, I love superheroes and that kind of shit in general, so super happy to be on.
Hell yeah, bro. We're happy to have you. Yeah, it's been like, I feel like a long time coming, but we made it happen. We made it happen.
And yes, thanks for all the schedule shifts that we had. Appreciate the patience.
Bro,
we're here and we're live. Yep.
Exactly. We're making it happen. We'll do it live if anybody's seen that one Bill O'Reilly clip. But anyway, bro. So we're going to be reading Spawn today. We're talking about Spawn today. We already read it. Hopefully you guys did too. But we'll be talking about Spawn today. And I guess we'll probably go just through the beginning of the stuff that we normally talk through, just the obviously writers, artists, everything like that. We'll go through kind of what the general thing is, and then I guess Isaiah, you can maybe talk a little bit about just the backstory of Spawn in general. I went through I ended up we're reading issues 30 through 33 today, right? And I ended up like randomly going back and reading issue number 1 just because they were all like 25 pages. So I was like, all right, let me just see what the deal is, right? But we'll let you do like the basics there, and then we'll come back around going issue by issue. But anyway. So Spawn, Ben and I will jump to the dossier here and walk through a couple of things for just the general stuff here. So Spawn, published by Image Comics, right? Which is crazy. We've been reading a couple of different things from Image over the time that we started doing this. And this is, I guess, interesting. So it's Image and Todd McFarlane Productions in particular. And this was pretty early on. I mean, this is the first one for Image, right? This is number 1.
Well, Todd McFarlane, we've mentioned it like a little bit in previous episodes, but his split off from Marvel, like he was like this up and coming artist, and he was doing Spider-Man at Marvel, like worked his way up to doing Spider-Man and also Venom, I think, but basically became like super popular. And then he sort of led like revolt of sorts with like a bunch of the other big Marvel artists, and they like jumped out to make Image. And the whole concept with Image is that it's a place where artists can actually own the intellectual rights to their characters and the stories and stuff that they're creating. And Spawn, I think, was like Spawn was one of his characters that he had been working on for a while or something. And
he was probably holding on to that. Didn't let Marvel know. He was like, I got some shit.
yeah, exactly. But it's cool. I mean, that's like the whole concept of Spawn is like indicative of the whole idea for Image, right? Just like artist owned, artist led projects, independent.
Yeah, crazy, man.
Just really cool. It was a big deal at the time, and I think continues to be a big deal now. And we've talked about this before on other episodes, but like just across the board in general, like artists owning their own work is important across, like not just comics. Like it's something we should be supporting. So
Yeah, definitely. You could see that with how the illustrations are in general with Spawn, how it's more about the imagery first versus the story. I think I touched on that briefly when we chatted on the side about this, Antonio, is that especially the first, I think, like 100 issues or so, it's more about the artistic sort of the way that the artists convey, everything from that standpoint. But as it goes on, they start making Spawn a more complex character and adding more nuances there. But definitely can see that in the early issues.
That's super cool. I mean, that makes a lot of sense, right? Coming from the direction that we did. So that's super fire. I mean, I think, so let's see, I'll go through kind of what the general thing, I guess, with Spawn is. We'll talk through the first, when it first got released and how that's going. So, Spawn, obviously, as we talked about, is the flagship title of Image, one of the longest running creator-owned superhero comic book series in history. Oh, funny. I didn't even know this, but this is the Guinness World Record achieved with issue number 301 in 2019. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
But so it follows Al Simmons, a black government assassin who's murdered and makes a deal with a demon called, what is this? Do you know off the top of your head, Isaiah, how to say it? It's Malabolgia or something like that.
Malabol, yeah. I was looking at it. I don't remember how it's pronounced, but
Malabolgia. Yeah. But so he makes a deal with the demons and returns to Earth as Hellspawn. So that's where Spawn comes from. He comes back disfigured, stripped of his memories, armed with a living symbiotic suit, which is pretty interesting, especially since we just read Venom. Yeah, we just read
exactly.
Venom.
Well, he was he was drawing Venom at the time. So I'm sure that's part.
Right.
He was on that wave.
For sure. But so he comes back only to find out that his wife is remarried to his best friend. That's pretty crazy. You're not supposed to come back and see that way. Yeah, brutal. But so he's caught between heaven and hell with neither side seeming trustworthy, which we actually get to see a little bit in these issues in particular, which is pretty sick. But he carves out his existence as a vigilante, haunting New York City's back alleys, protecting the homeless and the forgotten, while both cosmic forces try to use him as a weapon. So heaven and hell are really putting him between the rock and a hard place, but crazy. Wild backstory. And yeah, it's funny that we just talked about Venom.
It's cool that it also is predates, like a lot of these superheroes obviously predates us, like Superman, Batman, all this stuff is way back in the day. This is more modern, but still old school, from our perspective. 1992 first issue. And sold crazy amount of copies. Issue number 1 sold 1.7 million copies, which is still the all-time record for creator-owned comic books.
Wow.
Which I watched a video last night on Spawn that maybe I'll link in the show notes, just like to get some context and stuff. And one of the things that it was talking about is that period of time in the 90s was like there was a huge speculator bubble for buying comics. Like a lot of people that weren't just comics fans were buying hella copies because they were planning on reselling them.
Oh, so it's like Pokemon cards have gone, to else now. Yeah.
And I think that bubble kind of burst in the early 2000s or something. Like, I don't think it, but anyways, that's part of this, the success of Image and everything was it kind of coincided with, we've talked about this a little bit, Antonio, as well, with like the alternative covers and everything, right?
Yeah.
Which now is something that we appreciate, and it's cool to be able to see all these different versions and whatever, and for collectors to be able to collect, alternates and whatever. But at the time, that was definitely like a business decision where they were going, okay, we'll make like rarer printings, like rare versions that are gonna, increase people's desire to buy them and resell them or whatnot. So, but yeah, 1.7 million copies of a single issue of a comic book is wild.
Yeah, absolutely crazy. Published in 12 languages across 37 countries. Yeah, several 100 million copies sold worldwide. One of the ones that's actually kind of crazy here, which I was just double checking, is that they're doing and maybe that's why we're reading it right now, that we're cosmically reading this, because they're doing a reboot film, supposedly.
Ooh.
That's what I heard, yeah.
That's crazy.
Is it Jamie Foxx who's supposed to be?
Yeah, Jamie Foxx and supposedly Jeremy Renner, which is interesting. I don't know how Jeremy Renner fits into it, but Jamie Foxx, yeah. That'd be crazy.
I feel like it's been stuck in, production hell or whatever.
Oh.
I've been hearing about it. I've been hearing about it for a minute. Yeah, no pun intended.
Yeah, for real. That's how funny. But that's wild. Obviously, I'm going to have to go back and watch. There was the 1997 live action starring Michael J. White, grossing over 100 million worldwide, which is pretty crazy. There was an animated series voiced by Keith David, who has a great voice as well. That's pretty wild. Oh, and they had this is like 2021 universe expansion, right? So they've got 3 new ongoing series that got launched. There's King Spawn, Gunslinger Spawn, and The Scorched, which is pretty wild. So this stuff, again, this is super interesting. Again, this is, creator-owned, right, comic that's been going for so long and is now getting expansions. They're doing a whole bunch of extra stuff. They've had movies. They're getting more movies. It's crazy that it's coming back around, but shows the power of owning your own shit too, right? Because it's hopefully the money's going to the right places. And actually, we'll talk about it later, but there is, I think, in this first issue that we're reading, issue number 30. I don't know if you guys read the stuff in the back where he like answers questions from people. I thought that was actually super interesting to get an idea of just like the way that he thinks about that. Anyway, we'll talk about that when we get there. But those are the basic things there. We'll go through the kind of the creative team here. So Todd McFarlane is the writer, artist, creator. It's funny. So yeah, he created Spawn from a character he first sketched in high school, but he's done stuff on Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man, Spider-Man #1. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Obviously, Spawn, Batman Spawn crossover, which we'll have to check out at some point. I didn't even know they did that. But yeah, obviously, writer, artist, creator, pencilers. We have Greg Capullo,
which he brings in to do art, like with him, right? I think like Todd only does the first bunch of issues, right? Before bringing in more help. But still, it's another one of it's cool. It's rare that there's somebody who's writing the story, doing the art, doing that. Like the fact that it's sort of like really his vision.
Right. It really started that way. Yeah. You got to kind of command that moving forward. So our color artist is Steve Oliff, who's done a bunch of different stuff with Spawn. Letterer is Tom Orzechowski. Oh, I thought that was going to have a harder time, but that actually was not that hard. Orzechowski doing the lettering. So, and then there's a couple interesting. So we got also a couple of guest writers. Really an interesting one, I think, in particular for those of us who read Watchmen. Where else? Alan Moore did issue number 8 of Spawn, which I have not read yet, but that would be a super interesting one to see and compare how his writing style was at that time versus when he wrote Watchmen. But super crazy. So great team. I think that this was artistically just super interesting. I mean, Ben and I actually talked about this. I don't know if we talked about this off the pod or on the pod sometime, but just the difference in the kind of like, I don't know if it's the horrorness or just like maybe the horrorness, the creepiness almost of like the art in this, right? It's like his cape is also like such a crazy, I love the way that they do the art with the cape, which is wild. But anyway, crazy creative team that put together an awesome comic that we're going to talk about today.
Should we just take a minute and talk about Isaiah for a second?
Yes, let's do it. The man himself.
Introduce yourself a little more, and but also just tell us about like you were the one who it was like your idea that we were going to read Spawn. So like, what was like when did you get into Spawn? Like, what's your content? You said you were into superheroes, like you mentioned that a minute ago, but like, yeah, just talk about it.
I mean, honestly, my first introduction to Spawn was from that movie that was in the 90s with Michael J. White. I just loved how creepy it was, how different it was from typical superhero movies. And I'm always drawn to like that sort of horror element. One of my favorite villains is still, I believe it's Violator. Who's the big clown guy. I don't know if you've seen him in the movie or if you guys have watched the movie, but what's his name? Who is it played by? Oh man, he's in John Wick, the first one. He's the one who has the car. He's in a lot of movies back in the day. I think but he plays a great role. He's funny. He's got this super iconic look with his blue or white paint on his face. He's creepy, red eyes, and I just loved how quirky it kind of was at the same time. The animation and the CGI and everything is really bad, par for the course. But I think you guys, exactly. I think you guys should check it out if you haven't seen it. Gives you a good introduction to his backstory. As far as like comics go, I've always been, a big fan of Marvel comics. In particular, my grandpa was a huge comic book collector. He had everything like He-Man, Conan, Marvel, DC. And he actually had some of the more original issues. Like I think he had like Superman 1, Batman 1, all those crazy like god tier issues, but they got burned in a fire when he was, I think, a teenager. He still had a big collection and he passed some of that down to me, which I'm still trying to find. I don't know where it went because I've been looking.
Right.
But anyways,
that's so cool though, to get comics like from, through your family, like have that be something you can talk about with your grandpa and stuff. Like that's so dope.
Yeah, so me and him, he passed away, but me and him were really close, connecting in that way when it comes to superhero movies and comic books. So that's why it's so, near and dear to me. As far as Spawn goes, I haven't read those comics in such a long time, probably when I was like a kid. And I just knew that you guys wanted to explore different types of comics outside of, what's typical. And I thought Spawn is the perfect way to do that. I know you guys did Invincible, which is another, kind of out there comic book, story.
Modern, it's
and
like...
also, exactly. And so it kind of plays into that. So I thought you guys would find it interesting. And these are some of the issues that I just kept seeing time and time again, just looking through like Reddit and online. Like, this is what you could read if you wanted to kind of get a little bit of an intro to Spawn.
For sure. Yeah. No, I mean, these were super fun issues. I mean, I think definitely it's funny. I was actually talking to my mom earlier today. It's Mother's Day today, so shout out to all the moms. But I was talking to my mom earlier, and I was telling her about the issue number 30, which is one of the ones that we'll talk about. And she was kind of like mind blown by all the shit that I was saying. So it'll be cool to talk about for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Spawn in general, I mean, I remember being a kid. Spawn's another one of those guys that like went crazy with the merch, like people, which is another thing, actually. I just learned watching this video last night that I mentioned. I'll link in the show notes. But Todd McFarlane started his own toy company. Like a lot of those like really professional collectible like action figure type toys. It was kind of that, like, he created, I guess some of the Spawn characters too come from, like, he made them as toys first and then put them in the comics.
Whoa,
some of the things it mentioned. But yeah, that's another crazy aspect for all of this, and like has to do with how, like you were talking about, Isaiah, like how it's very art forward, or like image, not like the company, like the like the poses they're in, like his cape is in all these like crazy unrealistic positions and stuff, and it's cool that that's like an integral part of the character, and also part of Todd McFarlane's career, right? Like making the toy line, like all that stuff. It's all sort of. And the point that started me on this tangent was, I remember as a kid, there'd be like, I was a big like skateboard kid when I was little. I mean, I'm still a skateboard guy.
Still a skateboard.
But at the skate park, like, hella Spawn t-shirts, like it was especially like early 2000s, like even before I was able to go figure out like who Spawn was. He was one of those kind of like Venom also, we mentioned. It's like one of those characters you just see and you're like,
just badass. It's just badass imagery. Yeah, definitely.
Getting it through like osmosis, just seeing everybody wearing these things. But yeah, I'm trying to think about it. I feel like we've talked about a bunch of like the image of characters. We talked about that with Spider-Man and things like that. How like, again, you're just like absorbing this stuff through like the cultural zeitgeist of superheroes and things like that. But yeah, crazy for that. And it makes so much sense for that time period too, for Spawn being like that kind of like aesthetic. I feel like I remember those. Yeah, I remember those t-shirts, not at the skate park, but I feel like even in like middle school or some shit like that, people were wearing some cool stuff like that too.
It's also very 90s. It's very representative of what was going on in the 90s, like even in imagery for like bands and album art and all this stuff, like the chains and the spikes and the straps and guns and all, like, that was very like poppin' at the time, and also unique for a superhero to be like a lot of people would see Spawn and just like assume that he's a villain or what, and it's very yeah, I mean, it's cool. It's iconic. It's iconic imagery.
Yeah, it's a little off topic, but I feel like the 90s, almost every superhero had some crazy getup. Like, it was the most overdone getup that they've ever had. I think didn't Superman have some weird look, or maybe it was Superboy, I remember. But yeah, they were super over stylized during that era.
Yeah, I mean, Spider-Man got like the clone, the Ben Reilly clone. Like, I'm so edgy. Like,
yeah, right. Yeah, it is definitely like an edgelord time.
Batman got like I remember seeing something on Reddit. It was like Batman in the 90s got like a power armor. He got a bunch of spikes on his shoulders and stuff. Like,
that's so crazy. Makes sense. Who knows? I wonder who influenced who. We'll see. But yeah, crazy. I think that this is, I mean, we'll get into it. I think the art and just the way that they build Spawn as a character with this being like this living thing. I mean, it's kind of interesting to have, like, for example, even like the chains and like whatever else are like part of this living creature. But anyway, we'll get into that. We'll get into that. Should we just jump into issue number 30? I'll read the summary.
Yeah,
here.
or actually, do we want to Isaiah? Do you want to just talk a little bit about Spawn's origin? Like not even super specific, but just like off the dome, like what? I mean, Antonio read a little description of it, but do you like what's like the key stuff that we got to know?
I mean, I think he pretty much touched on it. I mean, he was one of the most elite CIA assassins, was betrayed, I believe, by Jason Wynn, had him killed, and then you go to hell, you end up becoming, a hell spawn, and then you think that you're going back to get, your wife, Wanda, and you're coming back like some years later, no, memories of how you got there, having to piece by piece everything together, and then eventually you find out that your wife is with your best friend, and I'm pretty sure that they end up having a kid too.
Damn.
So it's kind of just a really fucked up kind of way of coming back, and then on top of that, now you're thrown into this role that you never wanted to begin with, and then you're having to deal with, and Antonio touched on a little bit, like heaven and hell pulling at you, and trying to manipulate you and use you. And I think in these early issues, Spawn it's really shows that Spawn is still in that headspace where he doesn't know what he wants to be, who he wants to be, and how he wants to do it. He just knows that he wants to protect the people he cares about, which goes back into him trying to find any way he can to get back to his wife. But that's the interesting thing about it is that honestly, I'm reading it. It made me excited to see where does he go. I've heard some pretty crazy stuff about how much power and how much cool things happen after the fact, especially after the first 100 issues. But it's still interesting to see his headspace in that moment.
Yeah, that's super cool. Yeah, it is a very interesting kind of like start to this backstory, and I think that the issue that we're looking at right now, and the way that you talked about, like, obviously protecting the people that he cares about, but I do think it's also really interesting, like, that one of his things is protecting like homeless people and like people who are disenfranchised and whichever else, like that's seems to be kind of, and that'll also be very, very much shown in this first issue, which is super interesting, or the first issue that we're reading, which is issue number 30. Wild.
Sick.
All right, so let me see.
Let's jump into it. Yeah, we have a little summary of the issue.
Yeah, we do. So I'll read through this right now. So basically, Spawn is making his way back to New York after a trip through hell, and he ends up in the American South. He basically wanders. Spawn's funny. He wanders into Klan country and encounters this guy Brad Armstrong, who's a black man whose family is being targeted for elimination by a local KKK chapter. Spawn intervenes, but is shot in the head and lynched from a tree. He survives, recovers, traces the conspiracy to the local judge. That shit was crazy. Very Trudeau, who's secretly running the Klan operation. Spawn's solution is basically he uses necroplasm to transform the judge into a black man, and when the rest of the Klan that was with this dude shows up and finds him in robes, they end up lynching him. So they basically lynch their own leader, which is fucking insane. So he ends up leaving Brad, this farmer who is being attacked by these guys. The judge's files implicating the local government corruption, promises he won't be bothered anymore, and then heads off to New York. So crazy, super, I think, powerful first issue, I think. It gets even more interesting, I think, actually reading the stuff in the back that we'll talk about later on, just with people's reactions to this, which I thought were super interesting. Because again, this is issue number 30, and so it's probably still in the 90s and whatever else, right? And obviously, as time goes on, all these racial conversations and things like that improve. But I can't imagine the 90s were always the most favorable for maybe stories like this, but also stories like these written by a white guy. But that's neither here nor there. But crazy first issue.
Which is interesting, right?
Yeah.
It is a cool, not even like just Spawn being black. Like we talked a lot about representation in superhero context when we did our Black Panther episode. And it is, it is interesting. It's an interesting topic for somebody to be trying to have Todd McFarlane, white guy, be like, I'm writing this KKK edition.
Yeah.
It's kind of sick.
Yeah.
And again, like you were saying, Antonio, pretty, it feels ahead of its time in ways, I'm sure these conversations were being had in the 90s, but we don't know how that would have come across, you know what I mean?
Right.
To what extent, how people would have received that,
I imagine it was probably pretty controversial. I mean, if we're talking about even the art, like the cover image is pretty iconic in itself, and
Right.
and it's powerful in a way. But yeah, no, I agree. I definitely think it was controversial for those reasons that you stated, but also I think it's super important, no matter who it was written by, to showcase a story like this and to make, Black people feel more empowered that, hey, we have a superhero here that, you know, maybe gets us a little bit, because obviously Spawn is Black, but also will protect us, and that sort of fantasizable way or something.
Right.
Right.
And just to illustrate it, what Isaiah is referencing, the at least our version of the cover for Spawn issue 30 is Spawn's literally like hanging from a noose, and the whole background is just white. The whole thing is just framing him, limp, and calls to mind like lynchings, obviously, like right away. So it's pretty sort of like shocking to see.
Right, it's dead on from the beginning about what it's about. You can't open this issue without kind of knowing the direction that it's going in, which I think like you said is a very powerful thing, and especially like early on, doing that kind of thing is very important. So diving into this, I mean, we kind of talked about the basics of this already, but Spawn shows up in the South. He ends up basically realizing, he runs into the KKK, realizes that he needs to kind of protect this farmer who originally is like, hey, you look crazy, I'm going to kill you, like, because Spawn rolls up obviously with all of his chains and like his whole suit on and his cape. The other thing is also that he's like malnourished at this point. He's like his cape, and that's the interesting thing about him too. Yeah, his cape is all tattered. His cape kind of shows like how strong he is at any certain point. And there, like you said, I mean, there are moments that kind of make him look kind of villainy in these, but they end up saying to him, good for you. I got a message for you that you can take back to your clan friends, because the guy originally thinks that he's clan too, and he says, I'm not from the clan, and he says, then why do you wear your masks? Are you, who are you? What are you hiding? And Spawn's like, my past, right? He's like looking like kind of like Batman like or whatever else, in the dark. But I think what's also actually very interesting is this next little section where they basically kind of have him talking about I'm trying to look for the right word, but I'm going to say structural for now, but the structural issues with the way that America and the way that the world and white people in particular in this case like treat Black people and all. I might actually read this whole page, but starting with this, it says, you see, I've dealt with the white man too. Those boys are always in the power positions, ready to use and abuse the Black community. Somehow we're never good enough to do the skilled work, but God, how they love us picking up their garbage. Whenever the backlash comes, they shrink back into their holes, making us the targets for public scrutiny, the sacrificial lambs, the black sheep. And when confronted, they give that same plastic smile and tell us to be patient. The best we get is the government quotas, forcing them to hire minorities for bogus positions. My friend Terry became one of their token Blacks. If we try to leave, they just replace us with the next one who was let into the line as someone far too eager to please to even notice the danger signals. So believe me, I understand your anger, but they've only torched your fields. When they had all they could stomach of me, they torched something far more precious. That's why I wear the mask, because of them. And this is like, so Spawn is saying this to this farmer down in the South, and he also actually ends up taking off his mask, where we see his, like, again, he looks like intensely disfigured. It almost looks like he got split, like down the middle or something like that, with the sewing that goes up the middle of his face. But again, we don't even take this from just like like KKK bad, like we're going to fight against the KKK. They're like, hey, Spawn actually is talking about like the way that they've been, Black people have been treated over time, and I want to say structural. There's another word.
Institutionalized.
That's the word that I'm looking for.
Institutionalized racism. Yep.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. So, I think it's pretty impressive and good that they start right off. And again, this is, I don't even know what page, like 3 or 4 or something like, or maybe like 8 or something like that. But really early on in the issue, where they take the problem head on before even getting into like the rest of the shit. They're like, yeah, KKK is bad, and there's all the rest of this stuff too, which I think is super important.
Right. That is a really good point. It's not just the KKK. It's not just, oh, here's the scapegoat over here, these like villainous bad guys or whatever. It's like, nah, like we are also the bad guys. Our institutions are the bad guys. Like all these things that we're not addressing in, the way the government treats people. He's talking specifically about him in special forces or whatever, but we can we can draw this out to
parallel to anything. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's still relevant today. So, I mean, That's just crazy. But no, I mean, when I saw this, I thought like this is insanely crazy. I could see this just this little mini story alone being turned into like a kick ass, like almost Quentin Tarantino esque,
Yeah.
like short episode or something. That's kind of what it reminded me of, and then that's what also made me think of Jamie Foxx. I know it's getting a little bit of off the rails ever with that movie, so I'm really excited to see like what will they do with the character, but also just looking into like some of the imagery and as we dive a little bit deeper into the story, what Spawn ends up doing to sort of get back at the KKK, but also make Brad Armstrong and his family feel safe again.
Right. Right. Yeah. Wild. And so with this, it's kind of interesting. He pulls up to basically find these KKK guys. It's almost like fantastical again, like how, I mean, obviously it was like this in certain situations, but like they're really, I think, rightfully portrayed as just like this kind of crazy, like evil cult as they are. And he rolls up and basically pours a bunch of oil in this pipe, blows up a pipe underneath their car, sending them flying. It's crazy because he also at that moment is like, he's like looking super cool. He's like, leave the Armstrong Ranch alone. And then they just shoot him in the head and end up hanging him basically that same time. And what we don't realize is actually the person who kind of, I think, takes command of that moment is the person who we find out later on is also a judge in that county or in that area. But so again, pretty harrowing image of Spawn hanging from this tree. I think it's interesting. It's almost like the cape. Obviously, again, we talked about it being kind of on the weaker end right now, but it almost like looks like, I don't know, part of the tree, or like the way that it's just drawn there is pretty crazy. But again, pretty hardcore image to get us started in this story. And then we actually end up breaking into this kind of like side piece of being in New York with these two cops, which I don't know if Isaiah, if you know more about that in particular off the top of your head, because I think I did go back and read issue number 1 just to see if there was anything else. And I think these cops have been in it from the beginning, which is kind of interesting. But do you know any other context on them for now?
I think this is like a whole side arc. I believe that one guy in this page on page 12, the cop who's shooting at the criminal, I believe there's like a blood something mini series that kind of goes into detail about what happens to him. And we'll discuss this a little later, I'm sure, when we go into I think it's issue 33, when you see him all beaten up and tattered. And I'm pretty sure that the guy who goes to see him is either his partner or maybe the guy who ended up betraying Al Simmons, which is Spawn. But either way, but no, that's all I know. That's all I can remember. I just know that there's some side plot about them. Yeah. They're looking for something, but I can't remember exactly.
I remember just they are reoccurring cop characters that are kind of like on the side that are solving like street level stuff. Like I got the Spawn like compendium or something a bunch of years ago when I was still living in New York, and I think I probably read the first, I want to say like 10 issues or something like that. And I think they're in it in the beginning as well. I'm pretty sure I recognized the one who got like you said, got put in the hospital or whatever. But I think
I wonder if oh, go ahead.
No, that's all. That's the end of my point. Like I think they are just I think they're reoccurring side characters, like in the Spawn universe.
Right.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I wonder if they're kind of, I guess, akin to like a Detective Gordon kind of thing. I think they're just people who try to help, solve the issues on the human level within that, dark city that they live in.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, one of the things that they say, right, is, if that one of these guys says, if that file Spawn gave to us is to be believed, the chief's career is finished. And I think we actually learn a little bit more about that as we go forward. But there's this, whatever police chief there is like super corrupt and doing some crazy shit. Okay. Yeah. And then following along with this, what ends up happening is that this guy, Brad Armstrong, I think he's the one who actually cuts down Spawn from this tree, and immediately after this, the KKK guys show up and say a bunch of racist, insane shit, actually, right away. And then, they realize, oh, actually, I can't. I think he doesn't get him down, or maybe Spawn's already gone. But anyway, it leads into them going into court, and this guy, Brad Armstrong, is trying to take these KKK guys to court. They end up basically bringing in the guys who actually, I guess, got hurt during that big explosion. And what ends up happening is that the judge is like, don't waste my time with this bullshit. I encourage you to, find some evidence because, murder is a very serious charge, all this blah, blah, blah shit, whatever else, right? And then immediately after that, we see that the judge is like the commanding officer of these KKK guys. He's the one who's yelling soon, very soon, brothers, and then the guys in the background are like, damn, the judge sure is fired up tonight. And I love that they add that too, because it's like, just in case you didn't realize that this is the judge because he's wearing his fucking hat, this is the judge right off the rip.
Yeah. Which again is is very real and ties back to the theme that Spawn's little monologue about institutionalized racism and stuff, like built into the structures, like the people that are supposed to be enforcing
and impartial people. And so we go on. I actually think it's kind of hilarious the way that Spawn ends up starting to just like fuck with these KKK guys when he comes back. He some guy's like making moonshine and he pours gasoline in the moonshine. This other dude's like in love with his gun and he's like, he says, cost him over $5,000. His devotion is a touching thing to behold. And basically Spawn ends up stealing this guy's gun. Some other guy like wrecks his truck. I will say it's funny. One of the things that somebody says in like writing to McFarlane to kind of like critique this issue is that they're like, you like hella talk shit on people in the South, whatever, because it's like, oh, they love their guns and their moonshine and their trucks. Like, if I fuck that shit up for them, then they're gonna be pissed. But he goes through and messes with all these guys and then goes after the judge. And this is actually when we get, I think, another great image just from this comic in general, where he's gripping the judge by like the back of his, I don't know, whatever the cowl thing or whatever it is that they wear. And it's like his cape is like all like it's this crazy, and it's again his cape like doesn't even look like a cape half the time. It's like these little like stringy sinews of like a cape, which is,
we don't know what happened in the previous issues, but it's clearly gotten like shredded up from something that had just happened,
right. It shows his I guess weakness in this case. But so Spawn grabs the judge and basically says like, you got to pull up to this place at this time. Don't bring your friends because they're not going to save you, blah, blah, whatever else. And I'm trying to make sure I don't skip anything here, but he ends up basically getting the judge over to this area. The judge lies and says that there's nobody that's going to be with him. They end up pulling up. He's like, I can easily Spawn is saying to him, I can easily snuff out your life. Oh, your boys have finally arrived. The judge thinks that he's the cool guy. He says, that's right. That means you're a dead man. You must have forgotten about my friends. And then Spawn says the thing that I think is like the crux of what they're the point that they're trying to drive home at the end of this issue which is, he says, then let's just see how well your friends know you. And there's a big flash of green light. This also made me just like, because I haven't read the rest of Spawn, I'm like, what exactly are this man's powers, bro? He's got some very specific shit that he's able to do. But basically, the KKK guys end up running into this house and they find this black man in the KKK robes. And they're like, oh my God, that's terrible. The guy's saying like, Bill, Gary, what are you guys doing? It's, you're messing with me. And before the actual end of this issue, we see that Spawn goes to this guy, Brad, and gives him these documents that show that the judge is corrupt. He basically says, this will help you get through all this legal bullshit. No body of government outside this county will disregard these facts. Spawn basically ends up saying, after this guy says thank you, he says, I think the judge got the message. And then the last image of this issue is the feet of somebody as the KKK guys run off into their car, and what we end up kind of making the assumption, using that black space in between the panels, is that the judge ended up getting hanged by his own KKK brethren. Because, and I think the point of this, right, is to show the absurdity of doing something like this, where you're like, basically, this person who has all of the same traits as the person that you like, except for their skin color, and you're, this terrible and heinous and fucking shitty to them. But so that ends our first issue, which is a dive into a very serious and meaningful topic. What did you guys think of this so far? I mean, Isaiah, you're our guest this week. So what was, I mean, and this I guess maybe is a reread for you. I can't remember, but what did you think of this one?
Yeah, I mean, insanely powerful. I think as we go into the other issues, it's sort of its own like side story, but it has, an important message. I liked it. I thought it was cool. And then just a little more context, the green flashes that you'll see throughout the issues is, I think, necroplasm.
Right.
But he only has a limited amount that he, I guess, can use before he either gets like dragged back to hell or something happens. But we'll get into this also. But in the next issue, I believe there's hints that he's used it before. And so I think he could use it to do almost anything that he wants, teleport, change people's physical characteristics. Like he changed the judge from being white to black, and then that ends up, leading to his demise. But overall, this issue, yeah, super powerful. I thought it was great. It kind of reminded me of like a mini Quentin Tarantino story, like I said. Obviously not not really as vulgar. The KKK members did say some fucked up shit, but it wasn't like anything that's like, whoa.
Quentin Tarantino's firing away with those.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it was well done. I think it got the message across. But then again, I mean, if we want to dive even a little deeper, you can still kind of see where the artistic choices sort of trump the overall story, because it is still kind of spacey. It's a little clunky. And how the stories go about, but they're also pretty short, being only 25 pages. But overall, I enjoyed it, and I agree. Yeah, seeing his cape, the tattered and destroyed cape, but still having so much emotion and expression, and then, just seeing how he handles the situation in general.
Right. Actually, real quick, I want to jump in and say something about the cape thing. I think what could be an interesting aspect of this too, right, is that obviously he does end up using his powers at the end, but I feel like a lot of this issue is actually him not being able to use powers and solving this kind of like, again, like you don't have to be a superhero to do some of the shit that he did. Obviously the last thing, which is this big crux, is something that requires that, but the rest of it, right, is like some shit that you can do. It's almost like it's resistance in the face of whatever else doing all this shit to them to fuck with them. So it's an interesting concept there with the cape as well.
Yeah, I mean, I thought the whole issue was great. I think it was a really good recommendation. So thanks for
yeah, for sure,
for bringing this one to the table, Isaiah. The art is just incredible too. Like aside from the story and the impact from the story, like going to some of our Scott McCloud like concepts or whatever, the way that they're doing the text, the word bubbles and everything is all super creative. Those like that a lot of tone. Like in the beginning, we get these really spooky blue ones that are over the like night sky. Pretty much everything is giving us like a tone and an atmosphere, and like all this sort of like horror supernatural elements that Spawn has going on. Like all the art, all the text, everything is kind of serving that, and then also Spawn's word bubbles have their own little like silver border around
right. I was just about to say that. Yeah.
Really good way for us to differentiate and know when Spawn is talking. Another cool comic thing that we just encountered, some of our first examples of it, Antonio, but is a lot more common in these older comics, is the little blurbs saying like, for more context on this,
right.
blah blah, which is cool to see. Some of them cracked me up too, though, because there'd be ones that were like, this is from the issue before. Like,
yeah, right. They're like, go read the last one. It's in case you missed a week ago. Yeah, or whatever it was.
Yeah. So those, yeah. So some of those kind of made me smile, but in general, I mean, the art is just like so detailed, so dynamic. The panel layout is like completely different page to page. He's not really following any exact pattern or rules for himself. Right. He's just expressing it, just chaotically, There's a lot of shots too where there'll be like a larger piece of art in the background, and then some panels will be overlaid on top of that bigger image, which I think works really well.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, one of the things too that I just thought about, like these type of conversations and like thinking about the clan and these type of institutionalized things in the 90s. I just searched up the Rage Against the Machine song, Killing in the Name. Do you guys know that one? That's the one where they say like some of those that work forces are the same that burn crosses. And that was
Right.
one of those like punk things that people like to say in like the early 2000s. And that song came out in 1992, which was the same
Oh, wow.
year that Spawn started. And a lot of that was apparently following up from the Rodney King beating, which was in 1991. And in 1992, the Los Angeles riots, this was all specifically protesting, like this song was protesting police brutality and everything and systematic racism that was going on in LA at the time. But I don't know, it's just interesting. Like obviously we're here now and we have our own civil rights movements and conversations that people our age are having. But it's kind of interesting to see that I bet, this is part of what was going on in the conversation in the early 90s. And I'm sure was I'm sure if we go back to that period, like 92 through 95 or whatever, I'm sure we could find a bunch of examples where people were trying to bring these type of racial inequality conversations into different kinds of media. And so it's cool to see that.
Yeah, and to add to that, I would think like there's probably still not that many stories where this is clearly shown in comic book form. There's only so few Black, superhero, anti-hero, whatever you name it, characters. So I'd imagine this is probably one of very few that is this prominent, but also this focused on that kind of a topic.
Yeah, very true. I mean, it's interesting in a comparison, right, to Black Panther, which we read recently, right, where there's this kind of other take on just the way of portraying blackness, right? And it's a beautiful take where it's got this, community that has been kind of isolated from the world, has developed this richness, this technology, this unbelievable society, right? And then kind of and that's I think a beautiful thing in its own right, and I guess not even but I think it's important, right, to show these kind of sides of this story as well, right, where there is this terrible history. Absolutely.
And specifically talking about Armstrong, like his family ranch, these people who were able to get land when that's something that was like denied them for so long, and how important that's passed down in their family, and the judge.
Yeah, that's right.
Everybody coming out.
I was going to say this land was owned by his grandpa, right? That was the other big thing. It's like, this land, and the assumption, right, also that this land would be handed down probably realistically, especially from this time, maybe even sharecroppers or whatever else, right? So the land is not only just the land, right? It's the history of the land that we're protecting here as well.
Right. And it's a very cool setting, important setting. Also makes me think about Sinners, right? Which is something else.
Yeah, exactly. I was thinking that too.
Yeah, like media set in that like Jim Crow era South is just so fascinating and so important for us to confront, and really make sure that stays part of the like consciousness now, like for as much progress as has been made. There's like
more to go.
There's more to go. And also it's important to know not too long ago what things were really like for real.
Absolutely. It was interesting, so one thing I'll say, and for some reason I cannot find, I feel like maybe it's in the back of some other issue, but what was really interesting about the way that these comics were done, right, is that people were able to write in and kind of give comments and concerns, or share their enjoyment with the artists and the writers of this. And I think it was maybe even two of the people that actually wrote in that he ended up responding to were talking about kind of their automatic feeling like misrepresented in this, where they're talking about the South, right? And he obviously only gives kind of like one perception of the South in this, right? But it's interesting that, and I mean, I don't know, maybe it's presumptuous of me to expect certain things of who those people were that were writing in being like automatically offended. But I think it's interesting that reaction exists, right? Just because it's, you wouldn't assume that, and actually, I think that McFarlane actually says this, where he says, I've read about cops and, there being crooked cops and things like that, but every time that I write about a crooked cop, it's not an indictment. I mean, maybe it somewhat is, but like, it's not an indictment on every cop ever that I'm writing about this crooked cop, right? And so he says, in the same way that I write about that, I'm writing about this here. This is not to be a total indictment on the South, but to acknowledge the crooked and, you know, fucked up shit that does exist there, right? So, and I think he had a pretty good response, where he was like, sorry you got offended, but this is what I'm doing. So, you know, it is what it is, and it's already out. So what are you gonna do? But cool.
It's also cool. I mean, to that specific point, right? Like poetic justice is one of those things in like writing, right? People try to use in and like specifically what you were talking about, like the guy who loves moonshine, his moonshine getting filled with gas, and the guy who loves his gun, like that's all those are different little examples of poetic justice, which often happens in like fairy tales or Mother Goose type stories or whatever, right? Where there's the punishment is somehow related to not necessarily the crime, but like the identity of the person is getting the punishment, right?
Also, there's already thousands of examples of millions of examples of white people being painted in a positive light, no matter what area, state, country, whatever the situation is. So, I mean, and it's perfect. I mean, it's important to acknowledge the bad that goes on. But to your point, Antonio, it is crazy how some people always try to spin it back on how, even though it had nothing to really do with them, how it made them feel victimized.
Right. Yeah, and I actually found it out, and I didn't even realize this when I first read these, but the two people that responded were like 15 and 17, so I don't know if they really had the context for what it is that they were responding to, but it is interesting, right, still that they had that kind of like perspective. And I mean, there's actually this one kid who was 15 who said, you know, I'm not saying that there are no racists in the South, but there are no more, I think that this is, you know, contentious, but he says there are no more here than in the North, and the very few racists that I know do not belong to the Klan. He says, you just spit in the face of all Southern readers of this title and given others a poor misconception of the South. Very disappointed. And I think it's actually very cool just as a comic thing that he responds to this shit. I feel like you don't, like the way that we have this now is like through Twitter and like other random like bullshit where people are just like, hey, fuck you. And they don't even say what they don't like. At least this kid, although I think he may be slightly misguided in his understanding of what's going on here, I think the fact that he sat down and actually wrote out his thoughts and was like, this is why I feel this way. I don't, you know, I hope that you don't think that the South is still like this all over the place or whatever else. Like he's trying, I think he's trying to
found it and
take the point.
Did you find it?
Yeah. I was able to find it. It's in like, it's in the back of issue number 32. I think it is, right?
Yeah, it's page 33 in issue 32.
Yeah. But so, yeah, it's interesting. You know, he ends up, but anyway, McFarlane says, you know, I would agree with, you know, I think a good amount of what you said. I try to do a story on racism, trying to drive the point home in only 22 pages. Sometimes you don't have time to flesh out all your characters, and so we try to get to the heart of the matter by trying to conjure up simplistic images. I apologize. It's funny, he says, I apologize if I offended you or other people who live in the South. Believe me, it wasn't intentional. I think that that's probably true. I think, you know, nowadays you'd be like, hey, bro, why the fuck are you apologizing? Like, tell that kid to go to school, like, you know, whatever else. But I just think it's interesting that he does take the time to respond, though, as well.
I mean, I'm a Yankee hater. Like this dude's offended that we're talking about moonshine and guns and trucks. Like it's 2026. Listen to country pop. Listen to country pop radio. Like literally, all these motherfuckers want to sing about is their alcohol, their guns, and their trucks and women. So I don't know.
At least they're not singing about the racism off the rip. But yeah, it's anyway. We could go on probably forever about this 15-year-old's understanding.
Well, these kids are cutthroat. I'm looking at too. Yeah, they're all very direct, but anyways,
they are. It's pretty interesting. But yeah, so
it is amazing that there's like this kind of dialogue between the fans and the artists too. Like especially then, where they would have to be writing letters. You know, it's not just like. Yeah. The Twitter back and forth. Right,
exactly. Yeah, where you just, again, you say one thing and you just move on. And we'll talk about actually one of these later on I want to touch on, which is actually somebody who owned a comic book store and kind of speaks to how they feel about Marvel and a bunch of the stuff they were doing at the time. But anyway, that's issue number 30. We'll dive into issue number 31 here, which jumps away from that part of the story and goes back into Spawn returning to New York. So I'll read this little summary here, and then we'll get into it. So Spawn returns to New York City and reclaims his throne in the alleys. The homeless community welcomes him back warmly, though some grumble that danger usually follows him, which is probably true. Basically, heaven ends up selecting a new redeemer, which I'm sure that there's a bunch of context for this, but it feels like it's like the counter to Spawn. Like there are hell spawns and then there are redeemers, and there can be a bunch of maybe hell spawn, a bunch of redeemers, but very similar in kind of the costume and different things like that. But so there's this guy, Phil Timper, who's the reformed ex-convict who is chosen because of his new genuine purity of heart, making him far more powerful than previous redeemers. He was a convict, and now he's like this Bible thumper, whatever else. The Redeemer arrives and detects this guy, Bobby, who's one of Spawn's friends, because he had basically previously had Spawn had used necroplasm, his power, to resurrect this guy, Bobby. In this fight that they end up having, Spawn gets totally defeated. It kind of is related to what we talked about with his cape being totally tattered. It's because he's kind of in this weakened state. But so rather than finish him off, the Redeemer teleports away with this guy, Bobby, Spawn's friend, to the Heavens Orbital Station or wherever else. Spawn's left totally fucked up. And then... yeah, I mean, this is kind of like the first step into, I feel like, the next couple of issues. But yeah, we get this new idea of this Redeemer, who is again, like I said, counter to Spawn. And we also, again, I think get more of Spawn's backstory, where he is this guy who shows up and these two homeless guys are waiting for him. They're like, damn, I don't want to touch all the stuff that's over here because maybe he'll come back. But anyway, what did you guys think of this issue?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was a cool entry to, get an idea of Spawn's world, especially if you didn't get to read any of the previous issues. Mm-hmm. Him being kind of almost this leader of homeless people, or people who have been forgotten, or maybe, treated poorly, is kind of cool to me. I think that's a unique concept that you don't really see. Usually superheroes are this beacon of hope for the average citizen or whatever, but he's this beacon of hope for this homeless underground. At least that's what it seems like. And they all seem to idolize him. But I thought it was a cool, intro into that. But also, as we get into it, just some of these characters are super outlandish and kind of mysterious, and there's a lot going on that's still not completely explained. So excited to dive into that too.
For sure. What do you think, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, super great. Really, really cool. I as you guys both just touched on the homelessness thing, that's just so unique. Right. Honestly, not even in a super deep, just representation of homeless people in a positive light. The fact that those are just his guys, and that's where
they're his boys. He rolls up and he's almost noogieing them. Yeah, he's my dogs, which is super fire.
That's very cool. I think low key, I can't think of another example of I mean, let alone a comic, just a show or something where the protagonist chooses to live amongst the homeless.
Right.
And I don't know, it's cool. It's very, it's unique.
Yeah, I totally think so. I think
beyond that, the issue also was very cool.
Yeah, right. Yeah, but that first crux. I mean, I think it's pretty wild that we get into this. Obviously, he ends up showing up with his boys and actually kind of scares them at first, which again just shows kind of how good of friends they are. The fact that he can jump out in his crazy ass costume and not expect them to run forever after that, which is so wild. But they're yeah, where the hell have you been? Also, that's just a fun expression for him, is where the hell have you been, because he's Hellspawn. But not a chance. I'd miss you guys too much. Again, these are his boys. These are his actual friends. This is not just hey, whatever that one movie is where it's hey, concerned citizen, love you too, or else from The Distance, right? He's these are my dogs. The other interesting part of this, right, is that we get this, at least our first info on heaven, right, where it's commanded by these angels, and it seems like they're all kind of these middle-aged to older. I don't know if they're all white women, but at least in this one I think that they are. But they're all these middle-aged older women who are handling all this. We have this new person, Raphael, right? So again, I think specifically referencing certain angels in particular, but who's now taking over the orbital station from somebody who I guess had messed up previously. I guess they say that it's an embarrassing debacle dealing with the current Spawn. And I think that actually Spawn mentions this in the beginning of the last issue. We didn't touch on this, but he says something about like trying to get back to his wife, but this angel had like come on to him at some point. So I'm wondering if that's that lady. For those of you who have read this, jump in the comments and tell us some shit about that. But yeah, pretty interesting portrayal of heaven and the angels so far. I don't know. What do you guys think of this portrayal of heaven in this case? I mean, it's different, I feel like, than a lot of the stuff that I've seen so far.
Yeah, starting off with, I mean, yeah, it's interesting. It seems like these angels they have some sort of, I don't know if they're possessing these old ladies' bodies or they just are transforming into these old ladies to appear more innocent.
Right.
But that is interesting. And then, yeah, they have this huge tower, it looks like overlooking New York. But it is interesting, but it also feels like they're somewhat ominous themselves. Like it doesn't seem like they're truly a representation of what you might deem heaven as, which is pure, good and everything like that. So it seems like they have some sort of ulterior motive to sort of, be a crux in Spawn's life. And then going into some of these other hellfire, or I guess not hellfire, maybe angel fire creatures, I don't know, that are trying to build this anti-Spawn suit pretty much, or it's already formed. But it also gives you an insight into how those suits are sentient. And it's sort of like moving and flowing as it's being shown on page, I think it's 8. But yeah, it is super interesting. And then just diving into that whole, and then it gets into like all these different side plots. And like you said, starting with Terry Fitzgerald trying to like hack into CIA data, I think to get information on that Jason Wynn guy. So there's a lot going on in these first like 10 pages, but it is super interesting.
Yeah, and we get another moment of Spawn sitting on kind of the throne. And I mean, it literally is like a throne of trash that they've built in this alleyway. And he basically is kind of detailing to his guys that, they say that no one is safe. No one seems safe from conflict, not angels, not children. And I think that actually a couple issues ago, there was something that they touched on with like child abuse, actually one of these issues, which is pretty interesting. But Spawn goes on to say that a bunch of angels dragged me to heaven, then dumped me in the deep south. Being a Spawn makes me a prime item on their agenda. It just took me this long to get back without using the limited energy that devil gave me. And there's some creatures was giving him at least some of this energy. Being away was a chance to see that my existence isn't the only one that's out of control. So they end up, kind of like I mentioned, they basically end up finding this guy who was in prison. He becomes this total Bible thumper guy who's like this perfect little like side part gentleman, serving at this soup kitchen that says Jesus saves, and they basically zap him up to the orbital area, and they it's crazy what they do. And I think that this is another thing that like shows like heaven is not just like heaven, is like they call it nuclear fire diffusion, when they basically just like tear this dude into pieces to rebuild him into the Redeemer, right? That doesn't seem very like, I don't know if everybody who was like Bible thumping, if they were like, yeah bro, I can't wait for them to pull me up there and diffuse me into whatever else. So it's pretty interesting the way that they portray heaven and the angels here, I think, for sure.
It's definitely cool how they're setting it up like, morally, like how not everything that's coming out of hell is automatically evil, and not everything that's happening with heaven is automatically good, right?
Yeah.
Just some of the best stories are the ones where there's a lot of moral ambiguity going on, and so, I mean, sometimes it could be fun for things to be very, very, binary, like black and white or whatever. But a lot of times it's a lot more interesting when there's more depth and complexity, and we don't know what to expect, and
the nuance.
Yes,
indeed.
Something else that was just cool in this issue for me is like the in the very beginning when he's pulling back up to New York, like hopping off the train and whatever, and then like running through the skyline. All that imagery is really cool, just like how it's depicting the city. And then also another interesting thing is like we get this really big shot of the Twin Towers.
I was gonna say,
which is like very iconic New York stuff from before our era, obviously. Different New York from the one that Antonio and I got to know. But yeah, it's cool. And it's also he pulls up in the train and with a bunch of other homeless people coming off the train with him, right? Like they
Yeah.
the box cars and whatever it says. So it's also interesting. Like we think about superheroes, like traditionally what we would think of, like they're flying through the sky, or it's Tony Stark in his like fancy ass whatever, and Spawn is just
He's
riding
with
the
the
rails.
boys.
Yeah. Hmm.
You already know he's a real New Yorker. You know, he's out on the train.
Right.
He's hopping on the subway. He's jumping the turnstiles. You know what this man's up to, bro. Come on. Other random, like, kind of interesting thing that I actually realized while reading, I think these issues, but also going back to number one, is that there's this page, page 14, where they have these news reporters on here. These three news reporters, I think, are like consistently the news reporters throughout. I mean, I guess, Isaiah, I see you. Nobody at home can see this, but you're nodding about this. Am I right in assuming that they're kind of like the consistent people that are like giving these kind of three different perspectives on the story so far?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. It's almost like even just looking today, there's news sources that are very biased to one point of view, and each news source sort of has like this new like perspective on how this guy got snatched, who was this like saint ex-convict who over years became, like you said, this Bible thumper. And each one, I think it's got like CNN, E News or something like that, and then some like radio station of this really suspicious looking dude.
Yeah.
And he's the most outlandish, definitely has probably the most divisive and direct language about it, but definitely a cool perspective to see.
Yeah, pretty wild. And so we go on and we get this kind of moment that I talked about with the Redeemer, where we see this. I mean, it's crazy. This dude shows up, and his cape, in contrast, for example, to Spawn's, is like big, billowing whole thing. He looks like shredded as hell. It's crazy. He ends up also like, and again, this is the confusing thing about Heaven, right? Is that he's using his, whatever his kind of like opposite necroplasm thing is, to like control this guy and kind of like understands that he was recently touched by necroplasm, brought back to life by Spawn. And Spawn ends up showing up and basically being ready to fight against this guy, learns that he's the Redeemer, and Spawn just gets his shit rocked. Like, this dude's got full cape, Spawn has no cape, and he just gets his shit knocked all over the place. And
He's got
the
full
Redeemer.
cape.
Yeah, right. Full cape, right. And so what's interesting about the Redeemer thing too is that all of his speech bubbles have like a cross, like extending from them, which I think is super interesting. And I think do we get like a narrator moment here where it's like saying, listen to your costume, it's weak, thus so are you. Spawn is tossed aside, like a broken rag doll with each assault. His efforts are almost embarrassing, right? So we get a narrator moment where, again, it's talking about, his costume is weak. And it's interesting they also call it a costume. They're not like your body or your like whatever else. They're like, that shit's a costume, which I think is just an interesting perspective to take on that.
We have that same narrator right in the beginning too, when he's sitting in the boxcar, right? It's saying like he sits alone, swallowed whole by the darkness. So we have that narrator jumping in and out. I actually don't know. Isaiah, do you know who's speaking? Like who that narrator is? Is that a reoccurring thing in Spawn, or is that just like?
I have no idea, to be honest. I'd like to think it is a reoccurring thing, though, but it does bring that sort of third-person perspective, I think, right?
It's definitely a thing that was used in earlier comics a lot, like Stan Lee's voice. You know what I'm saying, Antonio? Like a lot of those type of comics would just have, in addition to the actual character speaking, would have a like. And then, dear viewer, we see them. We do a hero in New York or whatever.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So crazy that this fight is going on. Then the Redeemer ends up blasting Spawn. Spawn's getting his shit rocked, and then the Redeemer ends up doing even more. Well, kind of like encasing this other guy in like this gold, again, like kind of the opposite of necroplasm. But Spawn gets blasted. We end up learning that he actually has this gigantic hole in his chest. All of his boys pull up and are like, hey, what's going on? Are you okay? What's kind of crazy too is like they all know like everything about him. They're like, oh, he's not dead, he's not whatever else. Like they're not even like worried about him necessarily. They think it's crazy, but he has this giant hole in him from some previous battle, and so he basically convinced the Redeemer that he had, blasted him or destroyed him by just making him shoot through the same hole that he already had in his body. The other interesting thing that ends up happening here, right, is that the costume actually ends up kind of reacting to this lack of power, to this lack of whatever else, and basically lashes out at all of Spawn's boys that are around him. And basically he ends up yelling like, basically, I can't recognize who's on my side, run. All the guys are running as again, it's like funny to call it a cape because it definitely feels like more than that, but it's basically just like stretching and whipping out. And Spawn basically has to just wait until the cape kind of like tires itself out, and then it comes back, and we get this. Actually, this is a super crazy panel. Also, one other thing. Actually, I'll do one thing first. The thing that has like the Spawn logo and then like the numbers. Does anybody know what that is? I didn't end up looking into that, but
that's how much necroplasm he has left.
Oh, dope. Yeah, that makes sense.
When it started, it was like 9999 or something. Like it started full when he first became a Spawn. So Isaiah actually mentioned that a little bit ago. So supposedly that's how, like, that's why he can using his costume and whatever doesn't take away any of his necroplasm. But then whenever he does like magic, like spooky green magic, that reduces, he only has a certain amount left. And then when that goes to 0, he gets dragged back down to hell. So he's kind of incentivized to like not, like you were talking about in the issue before, Antonio, he's sort of incentivized to not just rely on his magic all the time.
That's interesting. So 6971, I wonder if the 1 is maybe the big thing there, right? Where he's really at the bottom of his power barrel.
It's weird how it's denoted too, with like a bunch of.
Is that like the last 4 issues or something like that, or something, or is it like?
No, it's just. I think it's just Todd McFarlane being wacky on how he wants to denote it.
Fire,
but it just counts down, like it goes like the 1 on the right. It's just like a clock or what, that goes down. And the 7 becomes a 6, and then the 1 is a 9, and whatever.
God, that's so funny. All right, cool. Let's go. We know that, but so after that, we actually get this crazy. I feel like actually one of the crazier art, at least for the panels themselves, right, where the cape ends up, or the costume ends up waking up, and it says it begins to move, to grow, to breathe, and we get kind of all these like individual shots that are. I don't even think you can like put them all together initially, but they're like these really, really thin shots of the cape and Spawn like coming back to life. And the way that the panels are drawn, like the outlines are super like scraggly and like whatever else, which I thought was super cool. Then we get the costume lives again. That's the ending part of this. And yeah, pretty wild, ominous. And again, this is kind of, again, the funny thing where he kind of has like a Batman like villain type of looking thing where he's just like a guy in the shadows who's got like glowing eyes, and you're like, oh shit, but now he looks strong. We can see that we only get a little bit of like the actual red of the cape, but it's it's looking big, billowing. Funny enough, speaking of Batman, there's a gigantic like stream of like 200 bats in this ending view of this image. So who knows, maybe Batman's there too. But
I think a lot of the Spawn stuff sort of feels like it's just like the rule of cool type thing, where like it's not as much about like a really hard power set, like, oh, this is exactly how it all works and we're going to be really specific about it. It's kind of like, this looks dope, this is badass,
put that shit in there, baby.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's it's again, like Isaiah said at the beginning of the conversation, like it's like very art forward, it's very which is very cool for Spawn.
I think Todd even mentioned, Todd McFarlane, and when he was responding to some of those kids, he's like, oh, I'm just, trying to Hollywoodize it. So he even admits it, that he's just trying to, add, that flair to it to make it look super badass. But yeah, I think it's really interesting how his suit is kind of just like spazzing out. It's like glitching and going wild, and then it needs to reset. And you get a bunch of dope panels of him just like almost rebooting because the suit is so exhausted. And it seems like the suit is sort of like entering this new phase of becoming something, stronger. So excited to see how it develops more in the next issue.
Yeah, agreed. And this actually, I think, was such a good issue. I feel like there maybe isn't as much to say, like, how did you feel about this issue? Because I think we all like thought it was cool, but I think it was actually maybe specifically cool because it is like a reintroduction a little bit to like Spawn. 'Cause it's like, hey, he's coming back to New York. what is he doing in New York? What do people think about him in New York? Who knows about him? What's going on, right? And we kind of get a bunch of those questions answered. We don't obviously get maybe the full breakdown of exactly, where he came from, but we get, I think, a lot of his essence and a lot of what he means to New York and the people and the specific people of New York as well, in this issue, which is super cool. And I guess the big thing that we'll be seeing moving forward is how heaven and the Redeemer fit into this story that's being created here, because they just took his boy, and I don't think that Spawn with his full cape is going to take that too nicely. So pretty wild. But so we'll jump forward here into issue number 32. Ben, do you want to do the summary for this one?
Yeah, for sure. All right, issue 32, June 1995. With the suit upgraded, Spawn goes on offense. He scales Heaven's Terran Affairs headquarters and breaks through a window directly into a meeting between Raphael, which is Heaven's head of earthly operations, and a mysterious elderly visitor who calls herself Mary. Spawn takes Mary hostage and demands Bobby's return, threatening her life if he's refused. Raphael, unnerved by both the intrusion and the hostage, agrees. Bobby is teleported back to Earth, but the Redeemer comes with him. A fight breaks out. This time, Spawn doesn't try to win. He grabs Bobby, detonates a necroplasm bomb in the building, and escapes to street level. The Redeemer pursues, but Spawn teleports Bobby and himself back to the alley.
Yeah, so Spawn's back. His suit's upgraded. He's ready to fucking battle everybody in this Heaven's Tower. And this is another one where we get crazy cover art for this one in the first place, but then the first page of this issue is so, I feel like, crazy. Again, it's this dude scaling this tower. It looks like, I don't even know what to think of this. Because it's like the whole, obviously it's New York City, but the background almost looks like, it looks hellish when they're going towards heaven. And we also get this gigantic, big, like billowing Spawn cape that shows how big and crazy this thing can be when it's either at full power or whatever level of power that he's at right now.
It's still all tattered up. It's very, very spooky look. But before, in the previous issues, it was like scraps. Now it's like enormous.
Right. Amazing first panel. Actually, these two kind of first pages are crazy. We get because the page immediately following that are these super detailed shots of him scaling this building, and we get his eyes and kind of the claws that he has. And I think this. You see the claws, you see the spikes, you see just kind of everything that is making him into this, again, hell Spawn. Right. That's like the funny thing about this, that he's Spawn, right? But he is supposed to be this kind of like hell creature that has come back. And then we get into kind of our first. Real conversation with these angels. And this one walks in, they're basically saying, Miss Raphael, the dignitaries are here, send them in. And these other ladies walk in with this definitely way older woman who, the way that they kind of like treat her is that she's definitely like either the head, angel or whatever else. It's also interesting the way that she describes kind of what their work is. She says, our goal is to listen, to learn. We guide only those who ask, and even then they mustn't know it's us. For the human soul is salvation for all of us, which is interesting. Like I feel like it sounds like a good thing, but it also sounds like I'm like feeding off of human souls. Like that's what it sounds like to me. So I don't know. Interesting angel ladies in these things. But another crazy, there's actually a bunch of like back-to-back crazy pages that we have here artistic wise, which again goes back to our like really heavy focus on art. But Spawn breaks in through these windows. And I think that this is the narrator, but it says, salvation, does that include the tortured and the damned, right? Which again goes back to Spawn's thing of like the tortured, the damned, the disenfranchised, right? Like, do they get the same salvation that we're talking about for all these, whoever else that's working here? And I would say probably not, but it's interesting to see how they take this. But so they get into this big altercation. And again, this is another crazy art piece with Spawn's cape just all over the place. He jumps in, he's trying to find his friend. You've kidnapped my friend, I've come to take him back. And I think this is actually, again, going back to this disenfranchised thing, like, it is so cool to see this guy. He's literally taking on heaven to save, in the most simplistic sense. Obviously, this guy has his whole life and his whole backstory and who he is to Spawn, but in the simplest, most bullshit sense, he's taking on heaven to like save this homeless guy, right? Which I think is such a interesting, again, hell Spawn, but such an interesting depiction of where his morals and where his loyalties lie. It's not to heaven or hell, it's to the people, whoever they may be, and somebody who is looked at it by society in a certain way or whatever else, right? It doesn't fucking matter, right? These are people. This is somebody who deserves to be saved at the same level of deserving to be saved as somebody else, which I think is super interesting.
Spawn for president.
Yeah. Exactly. Spawn for president. Yeah. I mean, how he chooses to use his necroplasm right there just shows you. I mean, he I don't know if he knows it's limited or if he has to find out, but the way he uses it's always to save somebody who might be, oppressed in some way. He used it to get back at the Judge Klansman in issue 30, and to help, Brad Armstrong and his family. And then he's using it again in this issue and previous issues to save, his friends that are in the homeless community. So it is really interesting, but it also kind of shows, like you said, where his morals stand and the sort of deviousness that comes with these angels.
Right.
They definitely don't seem super trustworthy.
Yeah, super angelic.
Or appealing, right? Like they're very conniving.
Yeah.
No, yeah. And you can see also in that issue of that old lady who's saying, for the human soul is salvation for all, and that's emphasized of us. So kind of curious to see what they mean by that.
Yeah, we also don't see we see the older ladies like pupils and shit like that, but the other angels, I think actually we only really see her pupil actually when Spawn breaks in, but the images that they have of her prior to that, you can't see, like her eyes are just white. They're literally just like the whites of her eyes. There's nothing else, which I think automatically, makes her kind of seem a little creepy for sure.
We also get, an incredible big splash page on page 8, which is like just him busting in through the window.
Yeah, amazing.
So much detail, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All the little shards of glass that are breaking, it's his pose, crazy dynamic. Like,
yeah. Really, and I think we talked about that, maybe you and me, Ben, maybe even off the pod, but just like the dynamism of his poses. And actually Moon Knight had a bit of that too, right? It's like a lot of these kind of, I'll call them Spider-Man-esque, but like, these kind of like bent legs, like, acrobatic poses.
Well, again, I think in this specifically, some of that stuff that we think of as Spider-Man-esque is Todd McFarlane-esque, because it's like, I think that's part of what he brought to Spider-Man, which was kind of controversial at the time. That's one of the things that came up when I was trying to, do some research for this episode was Marvel, I guess, kept giving pushback to him being like, dude, this is weird. Like, we don't need you to make Spider-Man be all contorted. And he would go, okay. And he'd just draw him that way anyway. And it would sell gangbusters, like people were really into it. So I think that's part of what we think of is like the poses with Spider-Man's like leg up above his head and all.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of this is iconography from Todd McFarlane's individual style. It's cool. It's cool how that impact that he had, that we just even think of as key Spider-Man.
Right. I mean, one of the most like iconic silhouettes I feel like of Spider-Man are those like poses. So wild. Actually, this next part of this issue is something that I think we definitely need like so much more context for, with this Cagliostro guy, who is described as this mysterious vagrant who in some strange fashion knew what Spawn was going through. That's how they describe him. And this is an encounter that happened actually just after Bobby was taken. Spawn ends up running to this guy, Cagliostro, who ends up basically saying, I see you're still trying to learn. You might need this. And he gives him this thing. It's blank, but has information. You still have so much to accept. Your friend needs you. Control your rage so that you may help him. Look again. And I guess Spawn maybe is learning to control something, but he sees the address that he needs to go to. So there's obviously like a whole lot connected to this guy, because there's nothing, at least in this issue, that like tells him that he's more than some dude that just knows about Spawn, but there's got to be some more beyond that. I don't know if there's anything there, Isaiah, but yeah, it's wild.
Just another mysterious character. That's it.
Right.
I actually did. Do you want me to reveal it? I did. This was something that got mentioned in my video I watched.
All right. What you got?
Well, supposedly, I don't have any information beyond this, but apparently it is just one of the homeless guys that he found in the alley. But I guess he had previously been a Hellspawn.
Oh,
wow! Whoa. That's super cool.
So he knows he's like the mentor guy for Spawn. He's able
Very
to
interesting.
give him some knowledge.
You know what that reminds me of? You guys watch Ghost Rider with Nicolas Cage?
Yeah.
You know, at the end scene with the old Ghost Rider, he gets one last ride on the horse, and he's like kind of his mentor before he goes off and faces I forget whoever the villain is, but that's what that reminds me of.
I saw that scene on TikTok like sometime recently.
Really?
It like came up. Yeah, it's that actor with the mustache.
Yeah, super deep voice. Yeah, badass.
That's so funny. I gotta go back and watch that movie. I haven't seen that movie in so long. That's fire.
That movie is sick, man.
I gotta go back and watch it. Maybe honestly, I might do that. Like,
where's our Ghost Rider? Where's our modern day Ghost Rider?
I'm saying.
These are real.
I feel like all the like underworld badass characters, they're just being like shoved in a corner. I mean, you've got they're supposed to do a Blade movie too. Where's that? What the fuck? Like, come on.
Yeah, we got to get it together.
Bring back for Blade, right? Like Mahershala Ali or someone, like someone amazing.
That would have been amazing. Yeah. Wow.
So fun.
Wow.
Marvel's really been trying. We talk about this. I feel like almost every podcast episode we have like a random throwaway line where we're like, "Damn, the MCU really sucks now."
Yeah, they're just they got it. Maybe they'll get it back together after they've now like. I feel like either they or somebody else is probably cutting their staff and shit like that. Whatever. We'll see.
That did just happen. Yeah. Disney just.
Right. Oh yeah, Disney. They did. Yeah.
A bunch of people. Yeah.
So we'll see, but. Anyway, with this issue, we also get another. We're back in this tower with Spawn, and we get another thing of him using his necroplasm, where he basically threatens to attack this older lady, takes her hostage, and says, I mean, what's funny is that Spawn is realizing that his cape is like becoming weak, and so he's like totally bluffing with his like big glowing green hand and claws. And says, you're going to help me solve my problem. The other lady that was kind of the main one who's taking over Earth stuff right now, she says, if you hurt her, I'll bring all of heaven down on you. And so all that Spawn is trying to do is get his friend. And we get this next point here when we're back in the tower. Spawn is basically bluffing to try and get his friend back. We also end up seeing where his friend Bobby is. They end up basically saying, he's meant to use his necroplasm. Yeah, they have him in like this. I don't even know how to describe it. It's like Matrix, but like worse, almost like looking contraption. I don't know what they're doing.
It does not look like a heavenly situation going on, boy, at all.
It looks almost like alien-esque, right?
Right. Yeah. It does.
And he's like wild. Naked. He's like.
They're doing experiments on him. They're like, experiments on that subject are incomplete at present. Current data show perplexing readings, unable to release subject at this time. And she ends up forcing the people that are doing these experiments to release him. But I mean, it definitely seems like they're probably doing something on him because he has the necroplasm shit. Like they're trying to
exactly. Yeah. I was thinking they're probably trying to figure out how the necroplasm works to get it edge up, because there's this hint of like this supposed heaven hell war that might be happening. And I wonder if they're like trying to get the leg up by understanding how necroplasm works in general.
Yeah. Crazy. So, I mean, they just are not angels. I mean, they also just like look evil throughout like this whole thing. That's the other interesting. They're never really portrayed as like looking nice. That just doesn't happen in these issues so far. So, and Bobby gets teleported to this area where they're all fighting. He's like crying like on the ground, basically saying, "Al, help me," right? Again, showing their connection. He's not like, please help me just to this random guy. He's like, Al, right? He's saying this guy's name. He's not even calling him Spawn or whatever the fuck else. He's calling him by his government name. And Spawn says, release him, I'll go peacefully. They basically ask the Redeemer to kill Spawn. This is one of the moments where they actually reference, like, they're like, hey, take a look at the last issue. But the costume ends up fighting back enough to beat the Redeemer. And there's some kind of crazy panels where I will say there were some moments where I almost didn't even understand what I was looking at in some of these, because basically Spawn is like shooting his like chains and all these things like up into the ceiling, basically piercing the Redeemer up against the ceiling. And this is also we learned that the costume is acting on its own, right? So Spawn has felt that it's getting weaker, but then the costume, I guess, is reacting maybe to the Redeemer at whatever strength it is at right now. And it says, like some ferocious beast, the costume flails violently. It will allow nothing to come near. Then, like the chains, the cape launched its own attack, like limbs and claws and teeth. The costume parts defend their host by whatever means necessary. And there's a bunch of crazy... these panels all just look insane. Like, and they're jumping on like that kind of horror aesthetic where everything's kind of like sharp and like specifically lit. I love the the color choices here, right? Shout out to all our color artists who are doing their thing. But these like reds and oranges, he ends up slicing off the Redeemer's hand, which is wild too. So he can't he slices off his hand, and then like the laser stuff that he shoots out of his hand, I feel like just keeps blasting. It's like the guy can't even stop it from happening. But crazy fight that ensues here, and I think again shows just the level of conflict that we're dealing with here. And then there's Granny in the background, right? And she seems to be chilling. I don't know, bro. She seems to be chilling. We'll see.
Yeah,
but
pretty chaotic. And I think you're right too. I mean, it's a lot of really cool action. It also is, it's good that we have this sort of narration telling us what's going on as well, because it is kind of hectic. It's a little difficult to, it's not quite as legible as it might be, you know. It's a little difficult to know exactly what's going on moment to moment, you know. Like
shout out to the voice, Scotty. So Spawn is fighting through this. They end up calling all the security into this room. They're fighting past all this different shit. And then this Bobby's like, Al, do something. Hang on, Bobby, we're going to. Then basically he ends up using what we kind of described as this necroplasm bomb. And yes, so in a heartbeat, trillions of molecules disintegrate, transferred at the speed of light. They reassemble in the waste and decay of New York City Bowery. And we also get another one of the, kind of those like clocks where, again, I don't understand. 6902. I don't know what's up, what's down. I don't know. I don't know which one of these numbers means something. We'll have to look into that.
He has less plasm.
Or so we know. But so he teleports. Spawn ends up teleporting Bobby back down. The guy Cogliostro is down there. They're saying, he's hurt. Basically, the guy in response just says, he's not hurt. He's just unconscious. Don't worry. Our friend fared surprisingly well considering he just survived a battle with God. And the guy says, what do you mean? Are you saying God was up there? And then this guy responds, a chameleon of sorts. The Lord can appear in many forms. And then we jump back to up in the tower, and we end up hearing the old lady. Basically, they're all the women are kind of going back and forth. This old lady says, girls, may I have a moment? This event has been no one's fault. As you are all aware, the security system is designed to do better, or to deter those who do not believe and those who are truly evil. Today, the system worked perfectly, for our visitor was neither. My children, you are too quick to act. The intruder is more than you think. Much like yourselves, he struggles to find answers on his quest. He is faced with confusion. And from the conduct I witnessed today, I'd say so are you, proving to me that neither side is ready for the great battle. You see, though Al Simmons doesn't know it, I allowed him to do what he did because he was fighting not for himself, but for a friend. Yet make no mistake, the sparks have been struck, and one day with time and guidance, his time will come, and he is destined to be the one. And then she floats out of the building looking like, it almost looks like a Jesus type something, like floating out of this building or whatever else. But so we learn that this old lady, whatever else that was in this thing, is supposedly God in this universe, which is crazy. So Spawn, and the fact that she acknowledges that Spawn is not evil. Like officially, we're like, Spawn is not evil because otherwise the security defensive would have gone after him immediately. So I don't know, bro. What happens when you battle with God? I don't know.
It is cool to highlight that he was doing it for a friend as well,
right?
Like his motivations, defending the innocent, all that type of stuff. Which it's very interesting. It's cool how McFarlane's making this part of the plot intrinsically, right? Where it's like his powers may be evil, but he's doing it
not
for good. Yeah, it's cool. Very cool.
Yeah, 100%. I'm curious to see what God's true form actually is, though.
Right.
Can't just be this old lady, but that was definitely the twist of the story. Yeah, just to imagine just a fight scene with this old lady in Spawn's cape. Oh my God.
I'd be down with that. Come on.
She's got a kick-ass cane too. Yeah, exactly.
I think it's also interesting. She says that he's destined to be the one, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't have enough context really to know like what kind of one that is. I mean, maybe it's the one that like decides this battle. Maybe it's one that does
something
else. But he obviously is very important, like cosmically, to this whole thing. Which is also, I mean, that's just like a different level, right? Like obviously we've had, I think, a bunch of obviously Marvel stories and wherever else that have gods and things like that, right? But this seems to be, at least in some ways, like rooted in the kind of modern version of God versus this kind of like pantheon of multiple gods and things like that, right? That we see obviously with Thor and different things like that, right? But it's going to be interesting to see what this battle is like and where Spawn fits into all of this, because he does fit into all of it, which is pretty wild. So we'll jump into our last issue here, issue number 33. Back in the alley, Spawn considers moving past this. His community kind of ends up pushing back, basically saying like, that he wants to leave because he feels like he brings a lot of danger to them, which is probably true, but they say, that they need him and they want him to stay. The quiet ends up being broken when one of the homeless men reveals himself to be a plant sent by the Violator who has been watching. He says Spawn's real name, which is Al Simmons, again bringing up the government, which is crazy, which snaps Spawn awake. Spawn chases this man through the alleys to this villain's location, the Violator, in the sewers. The Violator delivers his message plainly, which says, stay in the alley or his friends will pay. Their fight carries them deeper into the sewers before a flood of water separates them, and then the issue ends in this kind of the middle of this standoff, which is crazy. So we're getting this intro to this crazy villain. It's funny, Ben and I were talking about this a while ago, where this guy kind of looks we play League of Legends, so this guy kind of looks like this specific character Cho'Gath, which is kind of funny. I wonder if they took like any inspiration from the Violator, but so anyway, this issue is the beginning of this crazy new conflict. We get the beginning of this with this guy who is kind of doing, it looks like almost like a voodoo doll type thing, this new villain that's being introduced, and yeah, this guy says, I'll be watching from the shadows, just waiting for the right moment. We get the narrator say, a fiendish cackle reverberates through the reeking subterranean maze. Eventually the sick laughter dies, and then we go back to this debate where all of these guys, all of Spawn's friends are talking about whether or not it makes sense for him to leave, because Spawn's saying like a whole bunch of shit is coming to you guys. I found another place I can go. It'd be safer for all of us. Bobby says, look, you want to run out on us again, fine, that's your call, but don't try to pin any of this on us. We're not as fragile as you think, right? Which I think is another kind of cool, from the perspective of these homeless guys. They say, you see, Al, this trouble didn't start with you. What we go through, here he goes, what we go through has been this way for a long time. The psychos, crime, and violence, none of that's going to change. We'll still get beat up, shot at, mugged by the bad guys. Hell, even the good guys pick on us. So forget the nursemaid crap. We'll survive. We always have, right? Which again, it's such a cool stand-up moment for that community in this piece here. But Spawn goes on to say, like, yeah, but like I'm compounding on these problems, and there's a bunch of freaks, there's cops, monsters, hitmen, you name it, every weirdo possible was trashing your home. That's not fair to any of you. Again, great thing where it's like, bro, even if you're living in the fucking alley, it's not fair that somebody's fucking up your shit, doing whatever else. And long story short, this goes on to basically end up with him sticking around, Spawn sticking around, and deciding that they're going to stay. But so we get this little rat guy. I feel like that's the only way I can describe it. But this little rat guy pulling up and saying Spawn's government named him. He says Al Simmons, and Spawn freaks out. Right? We learned this little backstory. We says some time ago, too many people knew far too much about him. They had a knowledge that kept him trapped, with enough left over to eventually cost him his life. Now, given a second chance, Al is ensured that those around him know only what he wants them to know. He's revealed just general information. One fact especially has become sacred, protected at all costs, his identity. No one would have any way of knowing it, which is, again, crazy. First off, again, that this guy knows it and that they're saying it at him, but it goes back to all of those homeless people that know him and that are his boys. They all call him Al. So he has determined that they all deserve his trust and respect and whatever else, which is a big thing.
This little rat guy too, like, yeah, one of the concepts from an art perspective, right, that I think is interesting, that's been true across all these issues, is like the different characters will sometimes be depicted differently, like panel to panel, and sort of like the realism of them will switch up. Like sometimes it'll be like a wider shot where they'll look more more quote unquote normal. I don't know, but then we'll get these weird like zoomed in shots where they'll look really cartoonish or freakish, right, have so much details, and like Antonio I'm calling this guy like the little rat guy that is real. We'll get these shots like this really close up of him, and his teeth look crazy and his eyes are all bugging out and stuff. Right. And it is cool. He does the same thing with all sorts of different characters, and I think that's actually one of the cool things, like him giving himself that kind of freedom and flexibility, where he's not just pinning down like, I got to make sure the proportions of all the characters are exactly the same across the whole issue. Like he just sort of has a creative freedom where, like, whatever the story needs or whatever he thinks is gonna like look best at that time, right, there's a flexibility with how the different people are depicted.
Yeah, and we get some crazy stuff in this where the way that like Spawn is like yelling at this dude, and then the cape ends up just like enveloping like the both of them. We see like the eyes of this little like rat dude in the darkness of like the Cape that is just entirely like you can't even see Spawn. He's like everything is enveloped by this, and then he kind of like breaks everything up and then says, go tell your stranger he knows where he can find me. And we get this little narrator thing where Spawn releases his prey, knowing it will scurry to his master. And then we get these cool shots. I feel like these are almost like again Spider-Man-esque shots of him going through this. But he says, and when it does, Spawn will be waiting for tonight. The shadows will live. And again, acrobatic poses. I don't know what's up with all the bats. I didn't know Spawn was like that with the bats, but he's got some more bats behind him. It fits really well with the way that the Cape kind of looks with this, because it is kind of like those type of wings. But so this guy, little rat guy, ends up running back, asking the big guy who's actually out of the sewer now is like, hey, did he take the bait? And he's like, hopefully he's following like you wanted. What's next? And then we get this narrator say, a rapid, grotesque transformation happens. Then the whatever these guys call it, what is it? Violator kind of ends up. I want to say Spawn, but I can't say that. But so he ends up being created or like coming out of his whatever. And he says, "I'll take it from here. Thank you. You served my purpose." And he definitely has just like torn. He like just smashes his arm through this little rat guy's chest and takes his heart out. It looks like. And then funny that the next little narrating thing says, a heartbeat later, the sky is blanketed in red. And we see again this crazy cool shot of Spawn falling. The Cape, man. It's everywhere. We get, not only is it big in this first shot, but the kind of background shot to this page, the Cape is like taking over everything. It's like the entire background of Spawn, and his entire back is just the Cape, and then like 10 feet behind that is still the Cape. So he ends up going down into the sewer. He actually doesn't even go down the sewer. This guy like reaches up and grabs his like shoe. And actually, funny enough, to just talk about Spawn's like feet for a second, he kind of has these like kind of like almost oversized, I feel like, feet that are like wrapped in these spikes and whatever else that kind of look like funny to me whenever I see them. But
yeah, I was going to say on page 15, talking about like what Ben noted with the proportions. In the previous page on, I think, page 14, you can see his proportions are more normal with the spikes, wraps that he has on his wrists and his calves. But then on that page 15, one of them is just super big and like engulfs his foot. And the other one is super like skinny and more adhered to his calf. And then again, it happens when his foot is being taken on page 17 from the violators. Just this ginormous, like, I don't even know what you would call it. I guess just like
it's like an elephant foot almost. Like that's almost what it looks like. And that's a very interesting point. Yeah, even in that one where it's like he's doing his acrobatic shit through the air, it does like they look different. Yeah, just even, and they're not like farther away or whatever else. But like, and I wonder if is that like his right foot in particular that one of his feet.
It makes perfect sense, especially for when it's happening with Spawn, because of the suit being a symbiote or like a living thing, right? Like it's always changing.
It's doing its own shit.
Yeah. It's like being all
crazy.
But it is cool. He might have just been like, ooh, look, like we've got this, his foot is in front of the moon, and I'm just gonna make this leg
like a big old foot.
Yeah.
Yeah, fire. But so Spawn gets basically yanked down into the sewers, and we get this crazy creature that says, "Your existence has become a farce. You've learned nothing about what you are. It's an honor to be chosen as Hellspawn. Do you understand an honor?" And it says, Spawn says, "You get something straight. Hell picked me, not the other way around. So I don't give a damn about what you think." And this guy this violator just keeps kind of yelling at him, saying that, you're a fool. You see, I hear you thinking about skipping town again. Well, don't think that's a good decision, because we wouldn't want you to have your servant bones looking like our slaughtered friend upstairs. Now, would we? Because you don't have a choice, so you better care. Oh, he says, you don't care. You don't have a choice, so you better care what I think. But so, it's interesting that it's almost like the backstory of like just like why he can't leave New York, or like why he can't like go wherever else, is that this this thing is sitting in the sewers, waiting to tear up all the people that he cares about.
Also, how amazing are this guy's speech bubbles?
Yeah, right. They're like dribbling and
melting, gooey, like mucusy, slimy. It's so cool. Like they look like they're dripping down. I don't know. I think that's awesome.
That is awesome. It kind of gives each character its own personality. And then just so for you guys' context, the Violator, he was sent by that Malibu Gia to watch and spy on Spawn, kind of keep tabs on him. But he's like some demon entity, and obviously he kind of goes on about how jealous he is that he was chosen via Hellspawn. And I think that kind of in later issues drives into their rivalry or him being kind of that one of his biggest antagonists of his story.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I mean, there's this great, again, like kind of almost splash panel type thing. It has a little bit of dialogue, but, this is where the Violators sing, because one day I'll come to obliterate you. That'll prove once and for all that none are as worthy of the Spawn title as Hell's true citizens, right? Yeah, so exactly what you were saying, Isaiah. Again, crazy art. Cape's taking over the whole thing, fighting against this creature that, like, is a very weird build. I can't always 100% tell where the feet and the arms are at, but one of the arms is stretching out, so that's what I know in this image.
It is a weird build in a cool way, sort of like bent over, weirdly contorted. It's awesome. It's very cool. He's he has like these spindly insect limbs.
Right. He's kind of like insectish. His eyes are kind of like that too. Pretty wild. But so what's I'm trying to see if I can even find like exactly how this happens. I think it's like through their kind of battle that they end up both breaking this like water main. And they get both like swept away into this crazy sewage, I was going to say like waterfall, but like rapids of shit going on there. And we also get this kind of like moment where the Violators bringing up Spawn's past and just like how he was a murderer and all these things. Like, I mean, he was an assassin, right? But so it goes on to say, Spawn knows it's true. As a government-sponsored assassin, he regularly invented new ways to dismember. He became an expert at snuffing lives out. It's that trait combined with anger which feeds his costume, a costume meshed with his flesh in symbiosis, creating an entity which he tries not to think about, a killer, basic and total, right? So it's interesting, again, how they describe Spawn versus, like, in different moments, right? Because we get him, like, being this, like, again, he's got his good friends, but he's also just, like, a plain and simple killer. And yeah, it's interesting that Violator really is just like angry about this. He says, the uniform, how did you train it to morph into this soon? It still should be incubating. Tell me, who's helping you, right? It's this, again, jealousy, exactly like you said, Isaiah, which is really interesting. And so it's kind of funny that that's like the crux of their like beef, is that this guy's just like, man, I should be wearing that tight-ass costume. That should be me right now. I don't think it would fit him, but that's a different story.
I'd like to see how he would look in that costume.
Yeah, agreed. But so they get washed away by all this sewage, and it says, like another piece of garbage in the deluge, the hero is slammed from side to side. Survival is his only priority. He learns that his body, now composed of necroplasm, still needs oxygen. And worse, the Violator has vanished. Spawn expects, though, at some point, though, that he's somewhere in these sewers unharmed, and that he's at the mercy of that creature's next move. And so that is what ends our final issue here. We also get a timer. We get the 6887, no zeros, no ones. He's buffed up. He's got his cape enveloping him in a bunch of different ways. But so crazy, I think, interesting start to a new story, but end to where we're leaving off today. I think this issue was super fun, again, getting into this new arc. But overall, Spawn, what are we thinking? Isaiah, I'll jump to you as the guest. We'll jump to you first. You brought this to us. How did you like these issues, kind of reading them again? What was it like to revisit Spawn for you?
Dope. Like, just kind of, honestly, it was really fresh and exciting to see this, somewhat claustrophobic, but really detailed art style. And we that's typically what we kept bringing up, is the way they did the speech bubbles, the way they're able to showcase the intricacies of his cape, and kind of, you can feel that the cape is becoming more powerful and more together with each issue. Right. And then just so much, like, there's just so many layers, like, from an artistic standpoint, but also from a story standpoint. Like, there's so many things to unravel, and it does want me to read more and understand, what's going to happen next, because Jesus, like, there's subplot points, there's mini series, there's there's that, and there's a lot to uncover here. But just being able to be introduced again into Spawn's world was exciting for me. I love seeing, kind of that Batman-esque, just dark underworld version of New York, and even getting deeper into like the sewers and the underground, and diving into the homeless community. Yeah, it's super exciting, and I feel like it kind of mixes just a bunch of different things that personally I like within a story, as far as like the horror elements go, and just separating itself from the rest of the pack when it comes to a comic book storytelling.
Yeah, definitely. What about you, Ben? What'd you think?
Yeah, I thought it was awesome. Really cool. Definitely made me want to go and read some more Spawn. Go back and read some earlier issues too, maybe to try to fill in some of the blanks. it's yeah, man. Thanks for suggesting we check this
For real.
I thought the art is just such a highlight. I think it's interesting with the book too, like so many of the things that you could maybe like some of the things that could be criticisms of the storytelling or the art are also things that make it really unique and dope, you know? Like it's just sort of yeah, excuse me. It's just sort of its own like chaotic entity. And really prioritizing just like vibes and
right.
Atmosphere. It's very cool how unique it feels very 90s in such a cool way. Like it makes me think about like juggalos, like insane clown posse.
That's so funny.
A lot of horror, like when you go to like horror parks around Halloween time and all those just crazy clown demon it's a lot of hodgepodge of horror elements that you just don't normally think of being associated with superhero storytelling like this.
Right.
And it's just feels super unique, really cool. I get why, it's still longest ever ongoing indie comic or whatever. It's
right.
Deservedly so, I guess.
And speaking of Insane Clown Posse, I feel like I have to highlight it because in the next issue 34, you can see what the Violator sort of transforms into, his so-called human form. And that's kind of like just this weird, distorted, creepy clown.
Whoa.
It's
what
so
a great...
sick.
Do you see this one, Ben? The next issue?
I do. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's
going through someone's face like that. That's
and that's the Violator I know. Obviously, he has his demon form, but from the Spawn movie that we talked about in the beginning, that's kind of the form that he's generally in throughout the movie. He kind of has this like Danny DeVito-esque like penguin kind of humor to him, but like that darky edginess, but also kind of quirky and comical. But anyway, so that's one of my favorite characters. So I just had to highlight that really quick.
No, that's super. That's so funny that it really did just come around to the clown almost looking aesthetic. That's super cool.
Is. I've seen that guy. I guess I'd forgotten or hadn't realized that those were the same character. The Cho'Gath guy and the clown.
We call him Cho'Gath. Yeah.
Cho'Gath looks a little more thicker. He's a little juicier, but they definitely could be like brothers.
Yeah, they're brothers, they're cousins or some shit like that for sure. But yeah, so Spawn, this was super crazy. I think that this was an interesting one where the art, I think in particular, was like a standout to me. I think that the writing was cool. I think it would be really interesting to read that run that Alan Moore wrote and kind of compare the writing styles and see how that looks. We also know that some of the writing and the artist has shifts as Spawn goes on. But I thought that these were really interesting issues to go through. I think that we had a really nice contained story in the beginning that I think gave us another side to Spawn of like who it is that he protects and who it is that he fights for. I think also just acknowledging like for real his blackness in this situation I think is super sick too. And then overall I think this was just like super fun. I think that the aesthetics, like we talked about, really kind of stole the show for everything that we had going on here. So funny enough, like I said, I've already started reading some of the other issues. I went back and already read issue number 1, and we'll probably read a couple more as well as we keep going. But this was super cool. I think it was super fun. This is also our first like Zoom podcast. So thanks, Isaiah, for rolling with
Zoom.
us. Yeah, shout out to Zoom. We're expecting the Zoom sponsorship coming in any day now for sure. But thank you for joining us. This was a crazy one. And I don't know, we're reading Thor next, right? That's what we're reading, Ben. I think that we're reading Thor next. But
yeah, I mean, Isaiah, we gotta have you back whenever, man. We could read some more Spawn together, or read some other stuff.
Yeah, we were just talking about that actually before you joined this Zoom. Funny enough, so we'll make it happen for sure,
bro. Yeah.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate the opportunity. Love what you guys are doing, and I'm happy to support wherever story you need me to go, whatever comic book you want me to read.
Hell yeah!
There, and we can chop it up after to discuss another opportunity. Maybe.
Yeah, that sounds good. All right, gang. Thanks so much for listening. This has been Kickback Comics. Find us at Kickback Comics Pod on all of the socials. Check us out on Instagram. And thanks for listening. We'll be back later on. Peace.
Peace, everybody.
Peace.